What does the illustrious Mr. Coulombe think about fascism in general, and specifically the Austrofascism that the late Chancellor Dollfuss espoused?
Okay, we'll deal with fascism first. What is fascism? Fascism is the system, the political system espoused by Benito Mussolini and his disciples in Italy after World War I and going on to the present day, because you will find Italians who are fascists, who are advocates of the Duce's stuff. Those are fascists. Nobody else has the right to the fascist label.
Nobody?
Nobody.
Not the Nazis?
No, not at all. The Nazis, remember, fascism deified the state.
Okay.
But it didn't deify the Italian race as such until they came under the German thumb and got influenced by them. So you had Jews who were very loyal fascists in the beginning, because it was about being Italian, not about being Italian Gentile. And as far as Mussolini was concerned, a good Italian was somebody who spoke Italian. That's why you actually had fascist Arabs in Italian Libya.
Can't there be different branches of fascism? For example, like there are different branches of communism. I thought Stalinism was a certain brand of communism.
Well, that has to deal with his personality. But see, the problem with fascism is that it is intensely national. Communism is by design and by nature an international ideology.
Okay.
Now, yeah, it has different branches. Fidel Castro and Kim Jong-il were not the same. I mean, they were the same in terms, if you were in one of their camps, you probably wouldn't notice a great deal of difference. But there were some differences ideologically. But the whole point of Italian fascism was that Italy was the greatest power, the greatest nation on earth. It was nationalism on steroids.
And that wasn't in Germany's case?
Well, Germany, yes, except that he defined Germany as the German race, the German people.
And that disqualifies them from fascism?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Because fascism was, by its founder, Mussolini, designed to be non-racial and non-religious. Hence the Muslim fascists in Libya, hence the Jewish fascists.
Okay.
National Socialism was just what it claimed to be. It was socialism for a particular nation, the German nation. They would hold all things in common, ultimately. But he found I didn't really like the Germans either. They weren't worthy of him. That's why I wanted to bulldoze Berlin.
Okay.
But I tell you that, you could refer to, you see, in the 60s, they started the practice of calling anybody one doesn't like fascist. That's why we say Islamo-fascist today. Now, what has Islam got to do with fascism? Nothing, except when you don't like them. You might as well talk about Judeo-fascists if you don't like Israel. Or, I don't know, liberal fascists if you don't like, anybody that don't likes a fascist. And it doesn't have to make any sense. Why should it? I'm an American. Not making sense is my birthright. We fought a revolution. We came 3,000 miles by sea to escape old world logic. And we succeeded. In trying to force us to think rationally, you are undoing 250, 300 years of freedom. Yeah. So, seriously, you will find a whole family of ideologies in Europe between the wars and after that people like to call fascist. But if you actually look at them, their differences are enormous. And a lot depends upon what their connection to modernity was. I mean, Mussolini, remember, started out as a socialist.
Okay.
He was named Benito after Benito Juarez. The Italian for that name is Benedetto.
Okay.
So, he basically found through the Italian socialists' desire for pacifism in World War One that no, we'll break with them. So initially, fascism was nationalist Italian socialism. And there does have something of a connection to Germany because, of course, Nazism was National Socialism. It's interesting that we never say National Socialism because we don't want socialism to be used about people we don't like.
Ooh.
But
You're on to these people.
no, I'm accepting. I mean, none of us like things we like to be connected to things we don't like. That would be very strange.
That would be.
Yeah. I mean, you know, if I hate booze, right, but I love bars, I have a problem.
Yeah.
So I'll have to say, well, I go to bars because I like the architecture, I like the camaraderie, I like the happy hour food, you know, but I'm not going in there because people drink booze. That's the last thing in my mind. And so it goes with anything else, you know. I love gardening, but I hate flowers. Well, all right, that's great. Anyway, so as I say, if you look at each of these different groups that we tend to lump together as fascists when we go to Marxist-run universities. Oh, sorry, that came out wrong. All of them were quite different from each other. What tended to throw them together was simply the fortunes of war. You see, the European right, and this is a little complex, so I'll try to push my my things like this. The European right, pre-World War I, was defined by one major thing.
What?
Opposition to the French Revolution.
Ah.
Now, and you could add other things to that. Belief in the fall of man, as opposed to the liberals who felt that man was perfectible by his own efforts. You could say that the old European right tended to be monarchist and believed in the sort of corporatist, agriculturalist worldview of the pre-revolutionary era and so on and so forth. You go on and on and on like that.
Okay.
And that's where something like Distributism, for instance, has definite connections with the old European right. But you had World War I, and then you had the new technology.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, for a lot of people, we're not going back in that direction. The world's gone too far. We've moved on. So what do we do? Then there were other things at play. There was the question of defining oneself as against Marxism once the Russian Revolution had taken over.
Okay.
And there were border revolutions in Hungary and Slovakia and Bavaria in the early 20s. The Reds tried to take over all those places and failed. So you look at all this stuff, and you look at the fear of communist revolution, and you had groups that might have occupied, as it were, the same spot in their particular society. But, oh, their beliefs would be very different. Then you have World War II, and each group had to decide, in those countries that were occupied by the Axis, how they were going to react. The Axis had declared some of the same people, communists, profiteers, and so forth, to be their enemies. So maybe there are enemies too. You know, the friend of my friend is my friend.
Okay.
The enemy of my, I can do this. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That is an easy equation to make. Unfortunately, it's often wrong.
Yeah.
And it was really wrong in this case. Because actually, both Italian fascism and German National Socialism were modernizing elements of the left. They had no use for the old right except as window dressing and as patsies. Well, then that's one way you could deal with it, is to collaborate with those guys. And if you did, World War II destroyed it. The other way was to resist them. But of course, if you did that, then you're allied with the communists, you're allied with the liberals, you're allied with all these people.
Right.
You're on the winning side, but then as we saw as the years go by in Europe, you have less and less influence anyway.
I see.
And that was the great dilemma of the European right. Whatever they did, they were wrong.
Yeah.
Because nobody, either the Axis or the Allies, wanted what the European right wanted.
Interesting.
And oddly enough, they ended up not getting anything. They were ground between two stones. Now, to answer the second question,
Yeah.
and this is what really got me off of my diatribe, I hate the phrase Austrofascism.
Why?
Well, it's stupid. It's moronic. It's an example of what we call in Yiddish schmuckerei, which is the practice of being a schmuck. And there's nothing wrong with being a schmuck, ladies and gentlemen. If any of you out there are self-identified schmucks, or the developed kind, the so-called dumb schmuck, or the juvenile kind, the schmeckel, if you're any of those things, I don't mean to be offensive to you. Really. Hats off to you. And you're willing to be upfront and honest about it. But for the rest of us who may not want to be schmucks, it's important to define things properly. The people that the moronic call Austrofascists called themselves Christian socialists, except that's not really what the word meant in German. Christian social was what they called themselves, the Christian Social Party. And what did social mean? It didn't mean socialist, which is why the English phrase Christian socialist doesn't work for them. Social meant a state that was like a family, that was all connected, that was organic, where labor and capital would work together for the greater good. Where, for instance, you've got the shoemakers union, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got the various large manufacturers of shoes.
Okay.
Right? You've got the shoe retailers. And then you've got the independent cobblers, right? Now these four groups are together the shoe industry, actually. And without any one of them, they all lose. If you don't have labor, no shoes get made.
Okay.
If you don't have the companies, the shoemaking companies, then they don't get made. If you don't have the retailers, they don't get sold. And if you don't have the independent cobblers, there's no styles, no new styles created. So you need all four, don't you?
Yeah.
Now in the capitalist system, as in the communist system, these are seen as inherent enemies. But what the Christian socialists, and by extension their alt-right confreres throughout Europe, wanted to see were all of these people working together for the common good.
Okay.
And not just the shoe industry, but all the industries and the farmers and all the other elements of state.
What's the common good?
The common good is threefold: economic prosperity, spiritual good.
That's what they said?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Remember the Christian part.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And they wanted a third thing in Austria. They wanted to bring back the Habsburgs.
Ah.
Just as their equivalents in France wanted to bring back the monarchy there, and so on. The ones in Belgium wanted to make the king rule as well as reign. And so it went from country to country. They all had a different specific answer. But it was all very much along similar lines. So he asked me what I think of the Christian social movement. All for it. As for Austrofascism, I feel about that as I do the Tooth Fairy, as I do November 31st, as I do Peyton Place, or any other fictional or non-existent thing.
Okay.
Let that be a lesson to you. Never let the A word pass your lips again. Same with the phrase clerico-fascism, which these people will also use. Again, if you're going to do that, that's nice, but use it for everything else. So, for instance, the plumber that doesn't come on time, he's a pipo-fascist. If you don't get your mail when you're supposed to, your mailman is a postal fascist. See, just apply it around.
Okay. I'm going to defend the person who sent, Jared, who sent in the question, because he put Austrofascism in quotes, so that was not his word.
All right, that's fine. You're absolved. But beyond Jared, any of you folks that would like to use that phrase Austrofascist, as I say, be consistent, don't be hypocritical, and just use it of everybody you dislike. Call the cop that pulls you over to write you a ticket to fascist, see what he gets. See what happens. I'm sure, you may come close to finding out what fascism was really like if you do that.